everybody. It's Monday, and this week we're gonna open up the week talking about a couple of protests. All right, so the boys are back in town. You had the Proud Boys up in Portland, Oregon, and Antifa. The poor little wretches that they are decided to do their thing once again. On the other side of the world, we have Hong Kong gearing up for the Chinese, retribution, right? They don't ever do anything halfway, do they, Doku?
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if I would argue that much. I feel like if China really wanted to piss off the rest of the world, they would have done a lot.
But as we gear up for the show here and wait for some people to show up in the chat, you will notice we have avatars now. Thank you, StreamYards. We didn't even have to pay. I'm quite pleasantly surprised. It's nice when a company actually listens to the people who use it. Thank you, StreamYards. Good job.
Yeah, it is. It is nice when a company doesn't decide to step on your toes and actually gives their user base what they want and not be complete and total dicks about it.
Absolutely. And we're starting a little slow here. We'll build into it, kind of like Antifa on Pornhub. Well, like they get real women. Come on now.
Oh, you're on a roller, aren't you?
Hey, you know how it is. Okay, so China's usual reaction to protest is, I don't know, wasn't there that one square, right? There was a
Tiananmen Square
and a tank. Yeah, I remember something about that. That's the usual response, MC. China, well, they're a little out of the ordinary here recently. They haven't tear gassed the whole fucking place yet.
Yet. Keyword yet. And chances are it's not going to be tear gas. It's going to be something a lot worse.
Well, okay. China's in a bad situation right now. Right? Xi Jinping is in a dangerous situation. He can't afford to look weak, okay? But at the same time, if he goes full bore, it will destroy their economy. Okay, not because wiping out Hong Kong necessarily is going to destroy their economy, but everyone in business will just go, okay, well, we can't afford to have this happen to us. All right, so all foreign investment in China will begin to immediately dry up. All right, if they go Tiananmen Square immediately on Hong Kong. So what they're doing now is they're playing the long game. How long can these protests go on? What kind of sustainability do they have? All right, can we outlast the protesters? Okay, there's a strong sentiment amongst the Chinese people for order and stability. Okay, I mean, it's part of their natural culture. They don't like a lot of disorder. They really don't. And that's a cultural mindset. It's a social mindset. So they're waiting and seeing if that is actually going to eventually come into play to suppress the protests. At least that's my reading of the situation.
Real quick, we got Ant Jack in the chat. If they surrender now, thousands of Hong Kongers will be executed in secrecy. He is saying if they surrender now, they will be extradited to Beijing and they will be summarily executed. Is that a valid point?
Oh, they could be. That is something. I mean, let's talk about where this all began. This all began because they were going to allow people who were accused of crimes, all right, to be sent to the mainland for prosecution. Okay, let's take you away from where you have any possible defense and stick you directly under the thumb of Beijing. And let's take a look at how Beijing tolerates dissent right now. You have the one Zhejiang province, right? Where basically they've got a whole group of people that they're incarcerated in mass and sending to the re-education camps to get their minds right. In addition to that, there's reports that the ones that they're sending to camps to get their minds right, if they're a female, that they're given certain drugs which sterilize them. And this has all been recently reported. So,
well, what sparked this giant protest? That's what sparked it, or is this the same problem that's been going on with the whole Hong Kong situation since the British left?
well, I think it's been building since the British left, but the actual spark was the Hong Kong government getting ready to pass the law to extradite the anybody to Beijing.
What sparked the protest that we're seeing now was the prospect that someone from Hong Kong could be extradited to the Chinese mainland. But this tensions between Hong Kong and Beijing and the Chinese mainland are nothing new. It's the same kind of stuff we've seen with Taiwan back a few years ago, if you guys remember that. So this is nothing new. This is just the latest bout of pushback, shall we say.
But Hong Kong, unlike Taiwan, can't defend itself.
True.
Hong Kong is not in a position. They are not in a position to actually fend off a Chinese crackdown. Not saying that Taiwan would win a war against China, but China would have the mainland. But they would have a very difficult time actually taking and seizing and holding on to Taiwan. The logistics of attacking that are completely different compared to the logistics of Hong Kong.
Well, very true. I won't disagree there.
And quite frankly, we have a natural relationship with Taiwan that we don't with Hong Kong. Got to remember, Hong Kong was a British colony. It was not something that was supported or ever protected by the United States. Whereas the United States, I mean, even to this day, when China gets too verbally vicious with Taiwan, we always send a battle fleet through the Straits of Taiwan between Taiwan and China as a warning that we're backing Taiwan if push comes to shove.
Yeah, the 7th Fleet, they're always there.
Well, isn't the government of Taiwan the original Chinese government that evacuated during the Communist Revolution?
Well, okay, yes and no. All right, the government of China fractured. Okay, in the late 1800s. All right, early 1800s was already fracturing. All right, you have the Boxer Rebellion. You have all these different things, and areas were seized. And what it happened, of course, was it gave rise to regional powers. You had regional warlords. All right, Chiang Kai-shek was one of those regional warlords. All right, that for the most part seized most of China. Now he had a problem with certain areas that were always revolting, and one of those areas that revolted eventually Mao came from, and from the communist and using the communist philosophy, all right, rallied his forces. Now, then you have what happens is you have World War II, and in World War II, Chiang Kai-shek, all right, is being China is being invaded by Japan, but even during that time frame, Chiang Kai-shek was more interested in trying to fight the communists than he was the Japanese, all right, in many situations. So he was kind of ineffective in dealing with the Japanese threat. Whereas the communists under Mao said, look, we'll fight the Japanese first, and then we'll turn our eyes once again back to Chiang Kai-shek afterwards, which is why many of the European powers, specifically Great Britain, they were willing to give far more support, all right, to Mao. And of course, now you also had, because he was a communist, the Russians were doing it too. The Soviets were doing it too. So the United States was like, well, okay, we'll just kind of go along and we'll wait to see what happens. After World War II, we declared that Chiang Kai-shek was in charge. You have the Communist Revolution that basically kicks him out from the mainland and on over to Taiwan, which his last stand was in Taiwan. So if you want to say he's the legitimate government, I don't think you can really make that claim because the legitimate government was the empire of China and the emperor was gone. So it's just a power struggle of who's left. Does that make sense to everybody? So, I mean, you can say that Taiwan has legitimacy to an extent. It has as much legitimacy as the communist government from that perspective, yeah. But to say that it is the legitimate government or the only legitimate government, hard to say. Well, looks like we lost Bad Dodge. That's interesting. Doku, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So we lost Mad Dodge, huh?
Yeah, it kind of looks that way. Well, we didn't need him anyway. It's only his channel. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, we don't need the owner of the channel. That's fine.
Well, I mean, I do kind of wonder about this. I do wonder if we can continue on, right, without Mad Dodge and just take over his show without him being here. If he ends up, getting dropped off because of the internet or whatever, without we can continue, because StreamYards is providing the link, right? Oh, rat, he came back. Shh.
Oh, so we're gonna go full China on Mad Dodge's channel.
Yeah, we're gonna take it over. It was gonna be our channel now.
Hostile takeover. It's our channel now, Dodge.
Yeah, CenturyLink started spazzing. I'm like, what is going on?
What's up, Toya in the chat? What's up, Toya?
What I was saying is that China is the communist Chinese and the government in Taiwan both have, for all intents and purposes, from a legal perspective, an equivalent claim on being the true communist or the true government of China. They both have the legal grounds which they can work on, and like it or not, in many cases, power comes from the barrel of a gun. Quote Mao's Little Red Book, or misquoted to a slight extent.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I pointed out on Twitter earlier, in case anybody missed it. Our wonderful socialist overlord, or hopeful overlord, if he gets his way, Bernie Sanders said, "We must use the full power and full force of the federal government." That's about the most terrifying thing I can hear from a fucking politician. Just think about the words and the implication. The full power and force of the federal government. That's not exactly something I want to hear from someone who's a potential politician, especially a potential president. How about no?
Well, I mean, he's not lying about it. You got to admit that he's not lying about the kind of force that he'll use to enforce his diktats.
No, yeah, you're right. He's not lying, and I'm not saying he is. That's also the reason I find it incredibly terrifying that there are people out there who would vote for a politician who isn't even an elected candidate at this point, who is more than willing to get support for their political ideology, saying, if you don't agree with me, well, we're going to use the full force and the full power of the federal government. You thought red flag laws were bad. Doesn't that rhetoric kind of scare anybody else? Because it sure as shit scares me.
Doesn't surprise me. Why would the actions of somebody who's been a committed socialist, all right, who has no problem ignoring the actual tortures and abuses from the Soviet Union during his lifetime, all right, to the point where he ran over there for his honeymoon? Why would anybody doubt what his intentions are? The thing that always worries me is the people who have this opinion of, well, I believed in Bernie Sanders before, and my question is, because he was an honest man. Why do you say that? Well, why would you ever say that? Especially you young guys. If he's got a record, he's got a track record of who he is and how duplicitous he is. You can tell what kind of an individual he really is. He's got a record of it. Why do you ignore his record in favor of his rhetoric?
Well,
the thing is,
I don't like his rhetoric, and I don't necessarily like his record either. Not in the in elected office or what he did. What, he was a professional college student who couch surfed for 20 years of his life. I mean, what makes him fit to be president at all? Nothing.
No, the thing is, he might be honest, but when it comes to his rhetoric, the only thing I hear is, hey, I'm going to tax you so we can give you free stuff. Okay, so you're gonna give me free college and single payer health care, but you're gonna raise my taxes, so I'm paying more money to the government so the government can turn around and give me free services. Has the government ever actually been more efficient than the free market when it comes to the type of things you're promising me if you actually uphold this promise? And then you also use the rhetoric of you're going to use the full force of the federal government to enforce your policies, which means as a high impact, I think what's that guy's name, Brian? It will be by the barrel of the gun and through the threat of force or throwing me in jail if I don't comply with your policies simply because I disagree with them. That's what I'm supposed to be voting for? Kindly go fuck yourself.
Well, no, and here's the thing. Wrapping it back around to the protests. Look at the Portland thing. All right. Antifa. What exactly is it you're fighting for? And don't tell me social justice, because that means nothing. That's a indescript fucking blanket term that means absolutely fucking nothing, because social justice for Sally isn't the same as it is for Susie or Jim or fucking Jamal. It's not the same. So what is it you're actually fighting for? And Proud Boys, answer me this question. Why is it you keep going to Portland? Because you want to fight? Because if that's what it is, then yeah, I wouldn't give you goddamn permit.
Pro free speech. I don't know if they're IRL trolling or they're just a pro-Trump group. I still haven't been able to quite figure it out. But I can tell you they're not Nazis.
They may be pro-Trump, but the reason they're doing it is to be provocative. It's the same reason for sitting up there going, okay, we're going to hold a civil rights march, all right, with black people and march through Forsyth County, Georgia. Same activity, same kind of logic behind it. We know that these people aren't going to like the fact that we're demanding our civil rights through this area, and we're going to walk right on through. There's really not any difference between that. And now we lost Doku, it looks like.
Yeah, no, when he pops back in, I'll add him. And yeah, Pinoid, I think you're right. They want to fight. And, as somebody who has to fucking pay taxes in this state, I'm kind of sick of them fighting on the streets of Portland. Can they go to Austin, Texas or something? I mean, there's other fucking places, right? How about Seattle? How about you shit all over Washington for a bit? You know what I'm fucking saying? I've about had it, man.
Well, where's the home bed? Where's the home bed of these people? There's two places that are the hotbed of the anti-fascists. All right, Berkeley, California, which they're not allowed to. They won't even give them permits for anybody anymore to sit up there and have rallies, right? And Portland. So if they're going to sit up there and cause a stir, if they're going out there to make a point about free speech, as they claim, where else are they going to have it?
I'm just tired of them shitting all over Rose City. Can they go shit in Seattle for a change?
They're already doing that.
Seattle has its own problems, let's be honest.
And yeah, sorry about that. I dropped out. No, the point I was gonna make is I don't know what the fuck the Proud Boys are up to or what they actually stand for. I don't know if they're a living meme, but the only thing I can figure out is, hey, we're MAGA, we're free speech. Hooray, let's show up and wave American flags around. Like, I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that the Proud Boys are fucking neo-Nazis or skinheads. Please show me the rallies with people in pointy white hats and waving around iron crosses and swastikas. Maybe I'll believe the Antifa sympathizers at that point. But I've yet to see that.
Yeah, well, you know what? No. See, here's the damn fucking problem. And MC, you can go right after I'm done. Sorry. But Doku, you know where Antifa would be if they wanted to fight those people? They'd be in Idaho. They would be in Wyoming. They would be where those people reside. No. You know what they want to do is they want to LARP. And where do you go to LARP as an Antifa member? Eugene and fucking Portland, Oregon.
Well, I know MC wanted to go, but I just want to say something real quick. Antifa will not go outside of their own little strongholds like Portland or Berkeley, because just like the fact that they wear a mask and are afraid of being unmasked, they're fucking cowards. The end of fucking story. They're cowards. They will not go into quote enemy territory. If they actually found some actual neo-Nazis or some fucking skinheads, I guarantee you, I would bet my fucking life on it. They would run away like little fucking girls, because it won't be throwing concrete or bike locks or trying to pepper spray someone. They would be going up against people that actually do have guns and will not be unwilling to use them. Granted, good luck trying to actually find these people, because they don't fucking exist. There's maybe, what, 10, 20,000 at best? I mean, 20,000 would be generous. Maybe 25? Antifa's not going to do that.
Well, and Pinoy's bringing up Chicago. He's saying there's neo-Nazis in Chicago. I've never been to Illinois at all, much less Chicago, so I wouldn't know. MC, go ahead, sir.
Well, he's right that there are neo-Nazi groups, but the reality is even in Chicago, how big are they? 300 people, 200 people at most. Now, 200 people is not insignificant when it's concentrated in a city, though, and this is something people should be aware of. But when you say where are they running around, where do you see them walking around? They'll all point to Charlotte, like it or not. All right, that incident that happened at Charlotte did have the tinge and did have the ring of Nazism. You can't deny it. You can't deny that little rally with the damn tiki torches, all right, made an impression and has left a lasting impression. It does exist. Now, was it the way that they claimed it was? No, I mean, obviously they're over-exaggerating the situation, but that's what they'll all point to, and that's what they'll use as justification for acting the way that they are.
Oh, and also, you got to remember, the same people that are pointing at Charlotte are like, see, there's white supreme Nazi groups in the United States. You can only show me one instance of, I mean, how many people were in Charlotte? Maybe 250 tops. And what do? They carried around tiki torches and said, they will not replace us. You could easily take that and say, okay, well, maybe they're talking about illegal immigration and not how the media has spun it from an anti-Semitic standpoint. But they'll also sit there and turn around and defend frickin' Tlaib and Omar. So I'm not buying 100% into that narrative. And then when it comes to the fact, well, someone ran over somebody with a vehicle. I watched the footage. They're not lying when, that vehicle did have people surrounding it that were attacking this individual, or, bashing the vehicle with blunt objects that might have caused him to do something incredibly fucking stupid.
Now hold
Maybe
on. I saw them attack that vehicle after he ran over a person. I have not seen any footage where he was being attacked prior.
It's been scrubbed from the internet.
I have watched a lot of footage of that. We did a show about it. MC, you were there. Cabby was there. This was back at the beginning. Remember? The thing is, though, from the story I heard, is a gun was pulled and he gunned it. And I don't mean that as a stupid pun. I mean, a gun was pulled and he hit the gas and he panicked. When you go into fight or flight and you're in panic mode, you're running on adrenaline, really. I am not convinced that he killed her on purpose. I am convinced it was manslaughter if she died. I believe she did die. So he does deserve jail time, but murder, I don't think so.
And that's the thing about the situation. I am not convinced that it was intentional. I am convinced that it was someone who was in a panic state who did something really stupid, and regardless if she hit her head or died of a heart attack or it was being hit by the vehicle that resulted in her death, either way, the actions of the driver resulted in somebody's death. Yeah, that is undeniable. Now, what resulted in that situation coming about, I don't 100% blame the driver of the vehicle for. The same way that, when the Proud Boys show up at, say, Portland, if Antifa doesn't show up, well, guess what? The Proud Boys look like fucking idiots. And if Antifa was smart, that's what they would do. Because you know what? The Proud Boys would stop showing up.
Well, whether you like it or not, the Antifa wins when people are too afraid to stand up to them. You ask a question, Mad Dodge, why does the Proud Boys always show up there? Okay, well, Doku hit the nail on the head. Proud Boys are showing up because they know that their speech, all right, is going to be inhibited by Antifa. That Antifa has such control that if you speak out in Portland, you are likely to be beaten or hounded. That's why they're going there.
Yeah, no, I legitimately worry when my wife has to take my son up there for his appointments. Luckily, they're not as regular anymore as they used to be, but that's a legitimate worry of mine because Antifa is out there blocking roads. They are attacking white people driving vehicles for no fucking reason. They are doing the same thing Black Lives Matter were doing. Same tactics.
They're the same people.
I know.
And they're doing it because, let's be perfectly honest, if it wasn't freedom of speech in that regard, it'd be something else that they would be demanding that they control the freedom of speech. The whole political correctness. They're the ones who have appointed themselves to be the guardians of politically correct speech. They will determine what speech you can use and what speech you can't use. And heaven forbid you misidentify or misgender one.
Oh, and let's be honest when it comes to groups like Antifa, and perhaps this applies to the Proud Boys. I don't know enough about them to say this with any kind of definity, but yes, people are correct when they say the Proud Boys show up to Portland because they know Antifa is going to show up. Yeah, they are. They're being intentionally inflammatory. But at the other side of the coin, if Antifa didn't have something to fight against, they would find something to fight against. And if they couldn't, it would be the same thing that would happen to the Proud Boys. They would just stop showing up. They wouldn't get any attention. They would both fade into fucking obscurity. They feed off of each other's fucking malice. Now, I think Antifa is far more violent and far more looking for a fight than I think the Proud Boys are. I think the Proud Boys are basically just our equivalent of a bunch of drunk fucking college kids looking to stir up trouble. But if they knew Antifa wasn't going to show up, they wouldn't be going to fucking Portland. They'd be going somewhere else.
What was Antifa doing before the Proud Boys? They were attacking people like Ann Coulter, all right, Ben Shapiro. They would go after Milo Yiannopoulos, right? They haven't changed their tactics. They've done the same thing.
No, they're just looking for an opponent. Like this is why the joke that they're essentially LARPers. Like they're just going around looking for somebody to fight, trying to find an ideological opponent. If they can't find one, they'll make one up. Like they think the Proud Boys are the fucking KKK. They're not. Like you're telling me a bunch of people walking around waving American flags are fucking Nazis.
Well,
show me the swastikas. Show me the swastikas and the iron crosses, and let me see them doing the goose step with the jackboots. Then maybe I'll believe you. Antifa just is looking for an enemy. That's all they're doing.
The thing, though, you got to be careful of. Right, is you're saying, well, where are the jackboots? Where are the iron crosses? Where is the swastikas? The problem with that philosophy is this, from the Proud Boys' perspective, is how long is it going to be before, all right, one of those groups takes over? Okay, these kind of groups are susceptible for being taken over by a Nazi style movement because of the mentality of those people. They're going to respect, well, I stood up to Antifa, so that person automatically starts to get cred, right? At least he's standing up to Antifa, right? So he gets higher standing in those kinds of groups. Okay, so you got to be very careful with that because the Proud Boys could easily be co-opted and taken over by the fascists. It is true.
Well, I'm not saying they couldn't. This is the duality of the problem that we have. Is you have what's the term? When you go hunting ghosts, you'll see ghosts. When you go trying to hunt witches, you'll find witches. So Antifa's out there looking for the evil alt-right.
They hunt fairies. It's an inside joke, folks. It's an inside joke. It's not a sexual reference in any way, shape, or form.
You fucking fairies. But no, this is inside joke aside. This is the problem. Is because of groups like Antifa, they in turn give groups like the Proud Boys a degree of power. So you have this duality situation where, okay, are the Proud Boys Nazis? No. I can't speak for Antifa because I don't sympathize with them in any way, shape, or form, but I don't think they're full-blown Chinese communist yet. I think they're much closer to an extreme than the Proud Boys are. But if this duality starts to continue and play out to its logical conclusion, well, you're going to end up with one group of extremist communists, and you're going to end up with a group that could easily become a neo-Nazi skinhead, hate everybody that's not white and doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. But they will have created this problem for themselves because they're creating the type of situation that they're looking for. So it will end up eventually, if this is allowed to continue, where you do have a group of Marxist, extremist Marxist fighting against a group of, neo-Nazi skinheads. That will inevitably happen if this is allowed to continue. And they'll only have themselves to blame for it because the vast majority of people, guess what, aren't fucking Marxist and aren't fucking communist and aren't fucking fascist and aren't fucking Nazis. You'll have only yourselves to blame for it.
Yeah, but while that's true, while most people aren't that, they're going to have to step up to put an end to this, all right, on both sides. And I hate to tell you this, but the media has already chosen a side, all right, and therefore, just like in in World War II, right, with Nazi Germany, at the rise of Nazi Germany, the papers chose, for all intents and purposes, the side of the Nazis against the communists. People forget this. In this case, however, what you're seeing is you've got the papers not deciding for America, for crying out loud. Look at how the papers in the media in general, looks at immigration in the country. Okay, so you can see what side they're on. Now, whether or not that'll sustain itself, we have yet to see, but it's going to continue, just for that very fact alone.
Well, the reason they've chosen sides, they chose the side that's most closely aligned with their particular political ideology. Because at the end of the day, whether it's the neo-Nazi skinheads or the cultural Marxists, it's really not going to affect them that much. It's going to affect the average working class American. It's going to affect the immigrant, both illegal and illegal. But as far as they're concerned, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
They're going to choose the authoritarian side. The press will always choose especially the mainstream media will always choose the authoritarian side. Many people don't recognize this. Okay, there's a reason why the powerful press organs will always choose the authoritarian side. Because the press, when you talk about news, okay, it's not a money-making operation in general, all right? Entertainment is very, very lucrative, all right? But news is not. So in order to sustain itself, it wants to go where the authority is because they can always give them free funding on the taxpayer's dime. They will always, no matter what mainstream media outlets that you're going with, they will always side with the authoritarians, always, for that very reason.
And to pull on that thread a little bit, if it was the neo-Nazis and the skinhead group that were actually more prevalent and held more power, I mean, they're both authoritarian. Let's be honest. The Nazis, the anarcho-communists, also known as Antifa, they're both authoritarian groups. If the neo-Nazi skinheads were more powerful and more prevalent, they'd be siding with them. Plain and simple.
They would if they had more power, but they don't in a democratic state in general. Not to start off with, it can get that way though. You'd be amazed at how fast that they would switch if all of a sudden the United States started going down an authoritarian type of role. The difference, of course, is that we don't have the same society as Germany. In the Weimar Republic, we don't have that same social. But that's the only reason why they don't side with the Nazis. There really is. Now, I know a lot of people would vehemently disagree with me. Oh no! It's the corporations. Well, the corporations are always controlled. All right, whether it's in a socialist state, they are. The whole idea of rise of monopolies comes from the socialist state.
Well, that's the other thing. Everybody likes to say that. Well, yeah, the Nazis, they're the far right. I know the Nazi Party were National Socialists. They're authoritarian. They're statists. They don't believe in complete state control, but they are still very much authoritarian.
They're not complete, I guess, but might as well be complete. They really like the idea of fascism as well. They kind of mixed it and blended it together into some weird melting pot of fucked uppery.
Yeah, to say that they didn't believe in complete control belies the fact that, okay, if you take a look at the fascists in Italy, all right, that was state control run and state control managed completely. Okay, you can look at it from that side. The Nazis weren't, but that's because of the German society more than anything else. It was a matter of they hadn't gotten around to seizing those under the direct control of the state yet. All right, that's the reason for it.
Well, no, and as the war progresses, they seize more and more control. And if they would have won the war, you would have seen that the European bloc as completely controlled. Right. It would be true socialism.
Well, a great case in point that is often overlooked. Volkswagen was still a private company that was used to produce cars under the Nazi regime. It was also utilized by the state to produce tanks. So Volkswagen, because it was doing the bidding of the state, was allowed to be a private company and maintain its status as a private company.
Yeah, that's like saying Boeing's a private company.
But it is very much.
3/4 of their invoice, though, is government contracts. They're not a private company at that point, man.
But it is no, well, they're privately owned, but it is only under the behest of the state because they are producing weapons for the state. Where if Volkswagen was to go against the desires of the Nazi regime, well, the Nazi regime could easily come in and take control of all the assets, the intellectual property, and production capabilities of Volkswagen. That can't happen in the United States.
Not at the moment.
So they're not at the moment, at least. But that is the difference. Under communism, though, if it was Stalin or Lenin, Volkswagen would be a state-owned company.
But the reason Volkswagen was considered a privately owned company had more to do with the fact that they hadn't gone around to totally seizing it under the state auspices. It had more to do with the time frame and the timing than it did with the Nazi regime not allowing capitalism. You got to remember the Nazis rose after socialists such as Lenin and Trotsky took over the Soviet Union. They could look at what worked and what didn't, which is one of the reasons why you didn't see them seize farmland, all right, to try and create the collective farming, because they'd already witnessed how devastating that could be. It's not that they wouldn't have gotten around to it over time. It's just that they knew initially that they couldn't. And the same thing with production of war materials. They understood, okay, if we're gonna ramp up the war material machine, we need to be able to produce this right now. And as long as they're doing it at our behest, fine, we'll let it go. But they would have eventually seized total control and subordinated all of it directly under the control of the government over time if they had been allowed to exist for another 10, 15 years.
Well, no, and Pinoy in the chat says, a couple of things that are pretty funny. The Nazis were not socialists. Socialism requires voting. He also says the state designed their cars. I would add, of course they did. Their ass backwards.
I would say that it requires voting, but the Nazi Party was voted into office, and they had
that's the thing.
They
did have a voting system. It's just there's only one party you can vote for, and if you vote against it, well, you get Arkansas. But the other point I want to bring up is, yes, with the instance of Volkswagen in building cars, they were still allowed to operate as a quote privately owned business and somewhat autonomously. But it's also, I would make the argument, the idea of nationalism, because the Nazi Party is the Nationalist Socialist Party. The idea of nationalism is Hitler did not want to stomp on the heels of his own people and actually wanted them to be successful. Because if you look at post-World War I Germany, economically, they were screwed. There is a reason that Hitler was indeed, no matter how many people want to say this is not true, was Times Man of the Year and managed to pull the country out of one of the worst economic depressions that the world has ever seen. Now, the other point to that is he also recognized that a privately owned company would be more efficient at building and creating weapons of war for him than if it was to be under government control.
To a point.
Which is why he allowed a company like Volkswagen to produce cars, while at the same time also producing tanks.
Yeah, but the thing is, he might have dug the economy out of the gutter, but at what cost? He nationalized quite a few different areas of the economy. He also, behind the back of the entire world, ramped up military production, which was against the rules of the Geneva Convention, or not the Geneva, was it Geneva? What was the convention?
No, the Treaty of Versailles.
Treaty of Versailles, yeah. So he totally, blatantly violated the Versailles Treaty, and that helped prop up the economy without the rest of the world knowing.
And also, you have to acknowledge the other fact that socialism, regardless of its form or how people claim it's to be implemented, it does always hold true. Go back to Karl Marx and read exactly what the fuck he wrote. Socialism is simply a transitionary phase between capitalism and communism. And you see that in Nazi Germany, and honestly, probably one of the purest forms that we've seen throughout human history. Because it quite literally was a strange blend of statism dictating how the market will work, while still maintaining the same aspect of authoritarianism. And if the free market did not go in line with how the authoritarian government wanted it to, it could easily be taken over by the authoritarian government, and systematically, over time, would result in a communistic society. It just doesn't revolve a violent rebellion or a French Revolution, but it very much is a transitionary phase into communism. So I would make the argument Nazi Germany was quite literally fence-sitting between communist and capitalist.
Yes and no. I mean, the biggest difference between communism is how they decide on the leadership. Okay, the fascists decide and put all power into a selected leader. It becomes a one-man rule, all right, in essence. Whereas in communism, it's still an oligarchical system to an extent. Of course, there are shades of the leader principle, all right, throughout communism, simply because of the cult of personality can take place very easily.
Oh well, MC, real quick, I hate to cut you off. Just to clarify myself, I'm not talking about the political structure of the nation. I'm talking purely about the economic structure.
Well, the economic structure, like I said, if you take a look at the economic structure of a fascist system and specifically apply it to, for example, Italy. Italy went down the same road of collective farms and everything else. There was no private ownership of things. They were well on their way of seizing away and seizing control of all means of production within Italy. People forget this. All right, you did not have the kind of private ownership that you see in Germany. And now, once again, in Germany, it was a different social dynamic, which is the only reason I think that Hitler didn't go into the point of seizing control in these assets. And it has to do with the structures of the society being so different than what you had in either Spain or in Italy.
And that's a fair point. I disagree on a few of them, but I see where you're coming from on that. I would make the argument that the difference between Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy is that Hitler actually still did, above everything else, put the well-being of his country and its people above the control of the government. Granted, this does change over time, but during his early rise to power, I do believe that was his primary goal, is, dare I say this, make Germany great again?
Well, you could say that about Mussolini too. I mean, one of the things that he always was trying to do was make it food self-sufficient, and he bragged about how much the wheat, they were able to create the collective farming to the point where they were wheat self-sufficient. Of course, it was 5 times the price of what it would have been on the normal market, but that was immaterial. They had made Italy self-sufficient. So, I mean, the way Mussolini was thinking is he was going to bring back the good old days of the Roman Empire. He had a lot of visions for, quote unquote, the Italian people as well. He just thought that his vision was the one vision that he could bring the Italian people along with, that his was the correct vision for the Italian people. Their visions, their small little world visions are unimportant. And in that regard, he was exactly like Hitler.
Oh, and also, I feel like I do need to say this because I don't want it to get taken out of context or misconstrued with anything else. I am not saying that Trump is literally Hitler or a fascist. What I am saying is the one defining factor between the two is they cared about their country and their people. And nationalism is not a bad thing. You want to take care of your country and its own people. If I'm paying tax dollars, I want those tax dollars to go to, even if it's social programs, I want them to go to social programs that help Americans, like, say, veterans. That would be nice. I want to take care of Americans and American citizens. Nationalism is not a bad thing. So when people say, oh, National Socialists, that's Nazis, I have no problem with the nationalist part of things. I have a lot of problems with the socialist side of things. So I can understand why people start drawing the parallels and say, oh, Trump is literally Hitler. No, not really, because Trump's still a capitalist. He still believes in the idea of the free market. So don't misconstrue the two.
Well, no, and Falcon, first off, no foreign aid until the budget is balanced would be my direct answer to you on the foreign aid question. Second, wrapping this back around to China and Hong Kong, China is building up those man-made islands in the South China Sea. They are starting to press Hong Kong even more. They forced that extradition. And they are probably going to crack down on these protests here imminently. Where do you see...
They're gearing up for it.
Yeah, where do you see that headed, MC? Do you think the United States has any leverage right now to do anything about it? And if not us, who? The British?
No, nobody has any leverage. The leverage is, there's economic leverage, but that's it. And that's not enough to prevent them from actually doing it. The question about how they're going to jump and what all this is going to entail is completely out of the hands of the rest of the world. It's in the hands of two groups of people: the people in Hong Kong, all right, and Xi Jinping. That's the only people that matter. Okay. Now, when will China move?
MC, real quick. I think Hong Kong, though, is one step away from revolution. And now go ahead and continue.
Okay, that's right. But revolution requires weaponry. Mao is correct. If you're going to sit up there and revolt, you have to have the military might to revolt. You're not going to succeed by people dancing and marching in the streets, because when somebody comes eventually with tanks, you lose. Period. Okay, so I don't think they're as close necessarily to a revolution in that regard. The problem, but China's stuck between a rock and a hard place. The reason is, if China goes in full bore in Tiananmen Square on Hong Kong, what will happen immediately is foreign investment will dry up like that. Okay, and all of a sudden, them as a world economy goes away. Overnight, they will lose everything, and they understand this. All right, and that's going to cause even more. That would only exacerbate the problem. Unlike Tiananmen Square, if they go into Hong Kong, it will kill foreign investment. It cooled Tiananmen Square, cooled foreign investment, but it didn't kill it. They go into Hong Kong and it will, but at the same time, I mean, what they're worried about and their biggest concern, it's a legitimate concern, is it's spreading. Okay, so Hong Kong's getting away with this. If we make a deal with the people in Hong Kong to have this freedom, well, then why in me over this city in the mainland of China, why can't I have these rules? Why can't I start to protest for freedom? So if it begins to spread, then at that point, Xi Jinping is going to sit up there and order a mass crackdown, right, to put an end to it. Because that's the one thing that the communist state can't allow. If they allow this to spread, the entire communist state in Hong Kong, in Beijing, then becomes under attack. Then the center can't hold anymore. So and everybody knows it. That's why everyone's like, well.
Do you believe that people like Alex Jones are correct when they say China has been building giant ghost cities pretty much to prop up their economy?
Well, sure they have. Well,
yeah, they have. That's actually proven.
Well, but you got to understand why they're doing it. They're also looking at things in a different sense. Okay, you got to remember, whether you like it or not, the vast majority of the populace are still rural. They're still a rural economy. Okay. They are modernizing, that's true, but there's areas of China, whole swaths of China, that are nothing but the rural hinterlands. All right, in the United States, on farms, you have approximately 2% of our population, between 2 to 5% of our population is on farms. In China, it's over 60%. Okay, so when these masses of people start to move, all right, as agriculture becomes more efficient and takes over, where are these people going to go? Where are they going to go to live? They don't need to be on the farm. They always go into the cities, and then you need to have a place for them. They're building these cities, yes, and they're ghost cities, but they're building them with the idea at some point they will be occupied, and they're going to need to be occupied.
And also, you have to realize there's another indicator as far as China goes when it comes to population growth. Is yes, they're building these cities now when they're very underpopulated from what we would expect here in the United States or any other Western culture, where our major cities are overpopulated and China's cities are underpopulated when it comes to these quote quote ghost cities. You also have to realize China got rid of its one-child laws and things along those manner. As automation becomes a thing, as people start moving from farming or more labor-intensive activities, and they start moving towards more technological-based activities or office jobs, things like that, you're going to need cities like that. So you could actually easily make the argument, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, that China is actually trying to put infrastructure in place to accommodate this sort of new labor force, as you might call it. Or it could easily, real quick, MC, it could easily be said that no, they're just doing it to make it look to the investors and everybody else who's investing in developing nations that no, our economy is still doing good. Or it could be a social investment. It's hard to tell which it would be. But that's my 2 cents. What do you think, MC?
I think that it's a bit of both. I think it's a combination of both. But I also think that doing so will have its own problems later on. Because guess what happens when you put together infrastructure and 30 years later, 40 years later, that infrastructure is not adequate. okay, because technology has made it so. They're going to always be somewhat backwards in that regard.
That's a fair point. Also, the other thing I find interesting, most of these quote ghost cities are built far inland and not close to the coasts. And they're building power plants, production facilities, manufacturing facilities all around these areas. It's almost, if I were a betting man, it almost seems to me like they want the population to move further inland. Just something interesting to point out.
Well, I mean, the coast is already heavily populated. Why wouldn't you want them to move inland?
It's just something I wanted to point out because it's something I don't hear talked about very much.
I mean, what is it, like 90% of the entire Chinese population lives on the coast?
Oh yeah, and also as a producer export based economy, it would make sense that the majority of the population lives on the coast because, well, China makes the majority of its money building and exporting stuff to other nations, and that's probably where the majority of the jobs are going to be. But if you really want to stabilize your country as being self-sufficient and self-sustaining, you would probably want to at least facilitate some sort of economic balance. It's the same problem that we have here in the United States, where we're a consumer service-based economy. So if you're not a banker or an office worker, most people get their jobs and make their money by either working in the service industry or consuming stuff that other countries build for us, or, as much as I hate to admit this, we use credit and the banks make money. With China, it's the opposite. Your average Chinese citizen is not going to be able to go get a credit card that has a $1,000 per month or per week credit limit on it. It's a completely different style of doing economics, and it's not because of the way the economy is structured. More so, it's what actually makes the economy money. China makes money by selling shit. The United States makes money by buying shit and providing services. So it would make sense that you want to transition your economy. In a weird way, it's almost like China is actually becoming more capitalistic than the United States is. The only real difference is the fact that their government's authoritarian.
Well, that is what they're attempting. They're attempting to change the economics, all right, and still control the society. It's more of a social control than a necessarily an economic thing. But the reality is that kind of control at some point is going to require economic control, and they're going to slide back into it anyway. If they try to maintain the power structure as it currently exists, that's a given.
Oh yeah, that's inevitable because of the way their political structure is put in place. There will inevitably become a point where it will ultimately become who has more power. Will it be the government, or will it be those who control the factors of production? It's strange to me to say this, but it's almost like China has been shifting towards a authoritarian capitalistic society as opposed to a communist one, which would make Lenin roll over in his grave. But that's the direction I see their society shifting in.
But as far as Hong Kong goes, back to the protests, the Hong Kong was part of the colony of the British Empire. These were British citizens, and in 1997 they were turned back over, all right, to China, all right, and they had a choice. The British had a choice. They could have easily turned and said, you know what, Hong Kong is now, we're going to turn it back to China, but the China we're going to turn it back to is we're going to give it to Taiwan. They'll be one country. They chose not to do it that way. They chose to give it back to the mainland of China and give it back to Beijing. All right, that was mistake number one. Mistake number two is these were British subjects. These were British citizens. They basically stripped the people of British citizenship. All right, what they could have done is said, look, okay, yeah, we're going to give you the land back, but these are all British citizens, and you will respect them as British citizens. China may, would Communist China have agreed with that or not? Who knows? I guarantee that Taiwan probably would have. They probably wouldn't have had any problem at all with it. But
I was just about to ask, do you think if they did that, that would have started a war?
I doubt it. I really don't think that China was going to be in any position to try and do a war at that point in time, because what were they going to do? Well, we're going to go to war with Great Britain. Well, Great Britain does have allies. We were one of them. And the Russians, their relationship to the Russians has always been a bit iffy. Even today is iffy, but it was worse back then. So I really don't think China would have done anything.
Okay.
At least that's how I see it. So now,
sorry, I went and grabbed some pretzels. Yeah. When you look at it that way, though, I think the better move would have been either for the British to keep it, release it as a Commonwealth, or ceded it to Taiwan. They went with the worst possible outcome, I think.
Well, I think they made that. I agree with you. They made a mistake. They should have given it to Taiwan. That would have been at least given them a chance, for freedom. It would have at least given them a chance, because right now, I tell you what, I feel sorry for the people. I hope they succeed, but the reality is I don't think there's any chance. Not with Xi Jinping.
Well, and the thing is, Hong Kong has a very good economy, and it's kind of a powerhouse in the region, right? So when you look at it from that aspect, if the Chinese do crack down, they're going to hurt themselves, aren't they?
Well, yeah, as I said, if China cracks down, all right, right now, Hong Kong is approximately 5% of their economy, right? Which for an island is pretty damn significant, all right? But 5% of your economy is not earth-shattering. However, what happens after that is all foreign investment goes bye-bye. All right, everything is. If China goes in Tiananmen Square style, do you think that the United States is going to be even allow? You think that the American people would even allow Trump, all right, not to put tariffs on, not to come down hard on China? All right, the EU is going to be the same way. They're going to lose foreign investment like they never could believe. That's why they're playing a slow game, hoping against hope that eventually these protests just peter out and die sometime down the road.
And again, that brings me back to my point about the nature of the Chinese economy versus the United States or any other EU nation's economy. China is dependent upon production and export. If that part of their economy fails, it will be just as bad as, say, if hyperinflation or deflation happened here in the West. It will break the economy because that's what it's built upon. If China can't sell its goods, well, guess what? Your jobs go poof, they're gone. Bye-bye. Your economy collapses. Just the same way, if over here in the United States, if people stop buying things, well, guess what? Poof, your job goes bye-bye. The economy collapses. It is a teeter-totter of, what is the margin of economic error would be the best way to put it. When it comes to China, hey, you're over here, you have to make Nike shoes because Americans are going to buy them. If Americans stop buying Nike shoes, China's fucked.
Well,
It's also
China, but
the other problem is if Americans over here, we stop buying our Starbucks coffee or our Dunkin' Donuts coffee, or stop buying, those Nike shoes, we're both fucked. We're essentially conjoined at the hip at this point in time.
well, yes and no. One of the advantages is the United States economy is far more diversified. China is not the United States' number one trading partner. Period. Okay, we could if we lost China as a trading partner, it would not be nearly as devastating as China losing us as a trading partner to them, because we are their trading partner.
Well, and that's why Trump is smart when he's putting tariffs on them, because to be perfectly blunt, China does need the United States as a consumer more than we need China as a producer. He is perfectly 100% correct about that when he makes that statement, which he has. Now, that's not to say that people don't have concerns, rightful concerns, that Trump putting tariffs on China doesn't mean it's going to make shit more expensive for us. Just like China could go to other countries to find new trading partners, we could go to other countries to find new consumer markets or new trading partners ourselves. It's going to make it painful for everybody else. But so far, China has been the winner when it comes to this, because they produce a ton of crap, and yeah, we buy it up without a second thought.
Well, right, they've been the winner because we haven't cracked down. Trump's threat to the World Trade Organization and pulling out of WTO, all right, kind of sent some serious shockwaves in China. All right, people didn't realize that the dynamic that created. That's one of the reasons why China is once again back talking at the trade table right now. Because I don't think that they wanted to do that. I don't think that they would be back at the trade table, all right, until after the election if they could have avoided it. But China's not the economic powerhouse and sitting in the catbird seat that a lot of people think it is. Yes, it owns a good portion of our debt, but to be honest, what would they do with it? They would have to basically repudiate it. They would basically have to dump it on the market. And at this point in time, there's still plenty of people who would be willing to buy it back up.
Well,
would it hurt the United States? Yeah. Could the United States have some issues going forward? Yeah, especially if we don't get a handle on our governmental spending. But guess what? When that bill comes due, Americans will roll up their sleeves, and a lot of them will be telling the whiners to shut the hell up and deal with it, and we'll continue on.
Well,
I do have that.
MC, you also have to realize the other big advantage that we have in terms of this trade war is the fact that we're the consumer economy, not the producer. China still has to produce it, send it over here, and then wait for somebody to buy it. We're the consumer. We at least have a little bit of advantage when it comes to the time of, which economy sees a return on investment. So we have an advantage. It is a bit of a, I guess you could call it a game of chicken. Let's see who blinks first. But China is far more dependent on people buying their products as opposed to the United States consuming the products produced. So on that aspect, we do have the advantage. Granted, if China doesn't blink, well, they also have the advantage of natural resources. That evens things out. So it'll be, it's not, they have the advantage of natural resources. They don't have the advantage of infrastructure.
They don't have the advantage of natural resources.
It's a dangerous.
Where do you think that comes from? Where do you come back with that statement? They don't have the advantage of natural resources. Everyone talks about I know everyone wants to point to China. And they want to point to rare earth metals. Rare earth metals are only one small part of the world economy. Okay, everyone talks about it from a technological standpoint. All technology runs on this stuff, and we'd be in so much trouble. Really, the one thing that trumps all that and always will is energy. And China is poor, resource poor when it comes to oil, coal, uranium. They are not in a position, all right, from an energy perspective, to say that they're self-sufficient. They're not.
Oh yeah, I've brought that up in Big Fat Brian server, and I'm an oil trader. I follow these things. The United States has an oil surplus currently because of the trade tariffs. Normally we export oil. The United States is actually very, very oil rich. The same way that Japan was completely lacking in steel and heavy iron-based minerals. China does not have fossil fuels. And they have some, but they don't have the infrastructure to actually extract those fuels, let alone refine them and put them in a form that would be the best thing they can do is create heating oil.
They're also very, very limited in the amount of uranium, natural radioactive uranium that they have. They're not in a position to be energy self-sufficient. They're not.
Wait, are you telling me the dinosaurs didn't like China?
There's lots of dinosaurs that like China. Previously that just they were the non-oil producing dinos though. They just didn't like oil. We got the fatty oil fish. They didn't.
Huh? We lucked out on that one. No, sorry.
But it is a good comment to make. But yeah, China is very would have a lot of problems from an energy perspective. They are not energy self-sufficient in any way, shape, or form, and they won't be going forward in the future either. At any point in time, which is one of the reasons why their big thing was we're going to put huge, big solar collectors and then feed the energy back down to back down to the planet. Like, what could go wrong with that?
Wait. They want to do like the fucking Simpsons episode where they block out the sun.
Well, they were gonna put huge solar collectors and then microwave the energy back down under microwave collectors on the ground. This is one of their big proposals, and they're trying to move forward with it.
Hey, sorry, I lost you guys real quick.
Go ahead.
But no, one of the big points I constantly bring up is China does not have the same kind of oil reserves that the United States has. And what they do have, they don't have the infrastructure put in place to create the kind of energy independency that the United States has, because we actually do have that infrastructure put in place. As someone who trades oil, one of the big reasons that we saw a large drop in oil is because we have a surplus, and it has to do with trading with China. Now, if China was to find other buyers, that'd be one thing. Granted, you could say the same thing for the US. China's big problem comes from infrastructure and the sophistication of that infrastructure. It's almost the same thing that you see when it comes to Venezuela. Venezuela's big problem is they don't have the same kind of quality of oil. They don't have the same kind of WTI sweet crude that you would normally see. They have dirty crude, so it's much more costly and time intensive to actually produce something that would be gasoline. They can produce diesel fuel, but that's about it. They're not producing jet fuel. China has that same exact problem. So unless they can export what they produce, internally they're not self-sufficient. So they are reliant on exporting what they produce to other countries. That gives the United States an advantage when it comes to this particular trade war. That's not to say the US is not without its disadvantages. Specifically, we've given them...
Doku, I have to cut you off there because any disadvantages you could really bring up are on the manufacturing end. And given half a year to a year, we could be right back at full strength. World War II proved that.
Potentially, yes, but now at that, and this is why I say it's more of like playing a game of chicken and seeing who blinks first. Yes, you're not wrong, but also you have to remember China's very good at back engineering things, especially when it comes to technology. Yeah, they've built an entire economy around it. China can back engineer things very, very well. Now, it's not going to be enough to keep their economy afloat, but it'll be enough for them to wait out the trade war, as it's been dubbed. So, we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if it lasts long enough for them to make trade deals with other countries. I don't think it will, in my personal opinion. That doesn't mean it's not a risky bet. But I do think I do think Trump is actually smart when it comes to this one, and forcing the producer economy to come to the negotiating table and at least make some kind of deal.
Well, in the chat, Brian the Observer asks, what do you think about Taiwan offering asylum to Hong Kong? That was brought up earlier as well. Is Taiwan asking for a fight there?
It shows that they're not afraid to push it. They're pushing their weight around. But of course, that's their sovereignty is backed by the United States and Japan ultimately. Okay, would we back Taiwan? Yes, but is this a bit aggressive? Yeah, this is a big tweak. All right, I can tell you, China was very, very upset. All right, with that offer. Okay, they were quite hostile about it. All right, so it is a flashpoint. They did tweak the Chinese. There's no doubt about that. And yes, Taiwan is seizing the opportunity to say, look, we are going to be ourselves. But to be honest, Formosa, the people of Formosa, and from a societal standpoint, don't have the kind of commonality with Hong Kong, all right, that the mainland has. So whether or not Hong Kong would attempt to push it to that direction, that would remain to be seen, to be honest. Now, if China does go full bore and cracks down and sends tanks rolling across that causeway that they built all the way to Hong Kong, is there anything Taiwan could do about it? Well, no. So even if they did accept it, it would still rely upon the United States to do force projection in order to secure that ensure that it happens. Whether or not we as the United States will do something like that, it's hard to say. At this point in time, I'd say no, we wouldn't get involved. But that's just at this point.
That causeway, How easy would it be to, do demolitions? I'm sure there is some violent elements in Hong Kong. Is that something they would be looking at?
Could they attempt it? Yeah. I mean, it's a declaration of war if they do it. I mean, basically everything's off the table. At that point, it goes from cold standoff to a hot war. Now, in order to secure Hong Kong's freedom, they would have to rely upon somebody to be able to prevent China from landing forces on the island. And unfortunately, there's nothing that's going to prevent China from rolling in artillery along the edge and pounding the entire island flat.
And real quick, just to address the chat, Kenoid, if we begin to manufacture, we would have massive inflation. That's not entirely true, but the manufacturing we would have to shift our economy from being a consumer service based economy. We would have to export the goods that we produce, which wouldn't be that difficult to do. With what you're talking about, you would have to start looking at the Fed and how the interest rates are put. If they would essentially have to raise basis points. If they don't, you would see some inflation. Yes, it would take a long time before, and by a long time, I mean it would take about 5 to 10 years before you see any detriment to the economy when it comes to the inflationary standpoint. But the threat of deflation is a lot more detrimental to the economy. It wouldn't be anything that's uncontrollable. There is a threat, yes, but not as big as one, or not as big as you might think.
Well, okay, let's talk about this for a second because I disagree with both of you. Okay, and here's why: the United States doesn't produce not because it can't, but because it doesn't want to take the risk. All right, we could easily outproduce everybody in the world. Let's be perfectly honest. With our capabilities, we could sit up there and create an islands and islands of robot manufacturing plants, islands and islands of robot freaking industrial plants and farming facilities. Okay, we have that kind of capability. It's not technologically impossible, all right, for us to do that. The risk of doing that, all right, and failing is so great that individuals won't take that risk. But if push came to shove, would they do it? Yes. And would it be more efficient? Yes, it would. And we'd be outproducing everybody. So the idea that somehow we would have this massive inflation, no, we run the risk actually of the opposite, where we produce so much so cheaply that you end up in a deflationary standpoint, which can be just as bad.
And actually, real quick, MC, I hate to cut you off. My apologies. Ain't Jack in the chat. No, deflation is very, very, very fucking bad considering the current state that we've put ourselves in, because we operate under a fiat currency system that is inflationary based. Inflation can be controlled through interest rates. As much as I hate to admit this, I cannot stand the Federal Reserve. I cannot stand the fact that we operate under a fiat currency. I'm very much, I think we should, if I had my bet, I would say go back to the fucking gold standard.
Well, yeah, if you shifted the manufacturing and you also shifted the currency back to gold and silver certificates, and maybe add copper and bronze to the mineral market proper, and back your currency with them as well, or even go full bore and make an oil-backed currency. I really don't give a fuck, but make it a backed currency. Then you don't need to control interest rates anymore. Your currency is based off a hard physical asset that hardly shifts. And when it does, it's minimal.
Well, things would be much easier to control and manipulate, but here's the problem with deflation. When a currency starts to inflate, the only thing you can do to screw it over is by printing more currency. Once your currency hits hyperinflation, the only thing you have to do to stop it is say we're not printing more currency. Boom, you immediately just capped it. It's kind of the same idea behind Bitcoin. Once we hit this certain level, there's going to be no more. So whatever the market values it as, that's how much it's worth. No more, no less. Let the market value it as is. The problem with deflation is you can't control deflation. You can't control a currency losing value. That is the worst possible economic situation you could find yourself in. Because now all of a sudden, you can't print money. You can't manipulate interest rates. The only thing you can do is sit there and watch your currency go from 1,000 to 0. And there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.
Well, that's why you have the hard back, which is the actual commodity. It's the actual asset that you're basing it upon. Either that, or you go authoritarian and you do a bank seizure and you take the money, the currency out of the market, therefore lowering the supply and increasing the demand.
Well, this is the problem with having a fiat currency or something that's not based off of a hard asset. Once you hit that deflationary point, if you're in a bubble, that's one thing. The bubble will burst. It'll suck. Yeah. But as long as people still value your currency and consider it to have value, it doesn't matter if you're talking about bonds or you're talking about the actual physical currency itself, it still has value. The second it starts losing value, now you're screwed. Because how are you going to convince somebody, whether, let's just use an example. Silver, something I'm invested in. So if I start convincing you that silver is worth $25, well, the dollar starts deflating in value. Well, you're gonna have to exchange it for, a euro or a won or a ruble or something else. You're gonna have to find something for me to give you that 1 ounce of silver.
Well, real quick, Doku, you're gonna nerd out on economics for like an hour. Pinoid is challenging you, I believe. I don't think you understand currency.
Oh, I do.
Well, but we're talking about things from a theoretical standpoint, not necessarily from what the situation that we're in right now, and that's so it turns into an academic exercise. So, and that's not necessarily helpful to the situation that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, so I guess I should I should have prefaced this with inflation is not nearly as detrimental as deflation. We're still in an inflationary cycle because we printed a shit ton of money and we can still control and manipulate interest rates. If we hit a deflationary cycle, that's when things become very bad because the dollar stops becoming, worth anything. So it's not necessarily about whether the dollar is $2 today, $4 tomorrow. When you hit a deflationary cycle, people stop using the dollar because they will use other currencies or other mediums of exchange to acquire goods. because nobody's going to use a currency that hits a deflationary cycle. They lose trust in it. If you don't believe me, look at your dollar bill and see what it says.
Okay, fair enough. But back to the Hong Kong situation. We're at about 25 minutes left in the show, guys. Just keep that in mind. But so a move that drastic, like I was talking about, literally destroying the causeway, would be a flashpoint. Would the United States go to bat, or would we leave the fleet by Taiwan?
Well, we would if we were actually going to try and defend Hong Kong. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do to actually defend it. Okay, I'm going to be real blunt. All right, what do I mean by that? Could we prevent a landing by the Chinese forces to take it back? Yeah, we could prevent the all right, and project power, but we could do that. We do have the capability of doing that. What we don't have the capability of doing, though, is to protect it from the rain of artillery and the tens of thousands of artillery pieces that would be put in place when they start raining holy hell down on top of that island. So if China would just go, okay, since you want to go that route, we'll go scorched earth policy. They could do that, and there's nothing we could do to prevent them from doing that. And to think that they wouldn't do that if they destroy that causeway, I certainly wouldn't put it past them. So yeah, if it came down to that, could we sit up there and try and defend Taiwan from an invasion? Or I mean, not Taiwan, but Hong Kong from an invasion? We could attempt it. It would be very difficult, but we could do that. What we can't do, though, is we couldn't stop them from just pulverizing that into a moonscape.
Honestly, I'm gonna defer to MC on this one, because
the other problem, of course, that during that kind of an environment that we would have is how do you feed that many people? Logistically, it would be very, very difficult to get enough food there, all right, to take care of it. And then distribute that food, all right, while artillery is raining down. It would be impossible to protect the people of Hong Kong. Like I said, we could probably prevent a successful landing, a beach landing. Okay, we could do that, but any more than that, if China wants to say, okay, fine, we'll let you starve to death and we'll shoot down any kind of logistics that comes around there, they would do a lot of damage. I mean, basically people would begin to starve. You can starve a group of people into submission, right, Mad Dodge? Didn't we have that discussion earlier? The Civil War?
Yeah, well, Georgia comes to mind.
Vicksburg
the Anaconda strategy.
Yes.
It was effective.
Yeah, and when it comes to Hong Kong, I mean, could they do it? So could it become a flashpoint? Yeah. Is it likely to? I mean, anything is possible. I mean, there's a lot of things at play. Is Xi Jinping willing to go to war with the United States? Is he willing to go to war and have an all-out war? Because in order to protect Hong Kong, if we were truly serious about doing it, we would have to go on a total war footing and basically go out to pound the holy crap out of China proper. We'd have to go on an aggressive offensive maneuver to try and force China to redeploy its forces to deal with the American threat, rather than to just pound freaking Hong Kong back into submission. So if we went with a defensive strategy, there's no way to protect them. Offensively, if we could draw enough, even then, it would be iffy to see whether or not we could succeed, especially if it's all on our own. Now, if we were able to get Russia involved and we're able to get Japan involved, then we'd have a chance. But That would be our only chance, quite frankly.
Well, Japan's always been itching for a fight with China. Come on now. They hate each other. And also, Pinoy said we could arm them. That's a good point. What about transferring the assets from the Korean Peninsula to Hong Kong and Taiwan?
Arm them with what?
Missile defense systems.
We would have to put on so many missile defense systems. All right. I mean, the whole island would have to be one massive pile of freaking missile defense systems. All right. To prevent the artillery from coming in. You're talking about the Iron Dome, all right, situation times 100,000.
I highly doubt that would actually even help.
Well, with the amount of artillery that they could bring in, it would be very difficult. I mean, artillery to range from the mainland on over into there, they've got plenty of artillery. That's one thing that they learned from the Korean conflict was that artillery could do a lot of damage no matter how many people you have. All right, when shells come in, they kill by the dozens, not by the ones or twos.
Yeah, especially when you're firing shells that weigh 50 to 100 pounds. It's not exactly heavy artillery to move, and you can have a lot of it.
Yeah, you're talking. I'm not exaggerating when I said they have tens of thousands of artillery pieces they could put on the border and start shelling the holy crap out of that island.
Well, no, and Brian the Observer has a good point. Since when has arming political opposition worked out in our favor? Since never. Very good point.
Well, I would disagree with that statement. There's a number of times it's worked out in our favor.
But if you think about it, though, if we were to go to bat for Hong Kong and Taiwan followed suit, so did Japan, South Korea, suddenly you have a little war breaking out in the South China Sea, pretty much. That's many fronts. Could the Chinese actually move that much artillery just to deal with Hong Kong?
Well, it depends if you could put a broader based conflict. All right, you got to remember there's lots of things to do with that, and city warfare is dirty. If you're trying to do it the way we do it, all right, because we're trying to we go in to try and seize the city in a different manner. If you want to just starve a city into submission from a siege perspective, which they have that capability, Pinoy, they wouldn't have to do a whole lot. All they'd have to do is prevent them from getting food. There are literally millions of people in Hong Kong. Where are you going to get all that food?
Yeah, and I dare say that Hong Kong is mostly what? Commercial based and tech based. They're not ready for a war.
No, of course not. They have no weapon systems there. I mean, we would have to. You want to talk about arming them? You'd have to arm them. How are you going to arm them? All right, especially seen as they're controlled by the communist Chinese. How do you plan on arming them?
You can't.
And just giving somebody an artillery piece, for example, if I wheeled an artillery piece, all right, in front of the house next door, do you think that they would know how to work the artillery?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. You could give them weapons. They're not trained in their use. Good luck. The Chinese would squash them. They're the best thing you could possibly do if things really come to blows. Essentially put a chokehold on the South China Sea and stranglehold China.
Ari Prostate asked the question. He said, please explain for the people how does Taiwan fit into this? Okay. We did discuss this a little bit earlier. Taiwan, all right, exists, or the state of Formosa, the island of Formosa, was where Chiang Kai-shek, all right, fled, what we'd call the national Chinese at the time, all right, when they lost their bid, all right, to become the predominant power on the mainland of China, all right, and against the communist Chinese. But the people of Formosa, the island of Formosa, have their own unique culture that is not the same type of culture that you're dealing with in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is very close to Cantonese, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I don't think that's the same could be said about Taiwan. Could Taiwan's a much bigger island. All right, it is an island nation as well, but it's a lot larger. It's much further away, okay, from China proper than Hong Kong is. Hong Kong is only a couple miles off the coast, only a few miles off the coast, which is why they basically built a roadway from the mainland all the way to the islands of Hong Kong. You would not be able to do that. The water, between the islands is much deeper. It's a much harder, would be much harder to even attempt something like that over a longer stretch. To even attempt the causeway, a la, Alexander the Great and Tyr. Can Taiwan, is Taiwan close enough to get reined in with modern artillery? Yes. The Chinese could rain modern artillery, all right, onto Taiwan. However, in order to do that, they would have to move it onto the coast. And as soon as you moved it onto the coast, it becomes susceptible, all right, to power projection in the form of planes, okay, and jets and so forth. Okay, so China would be limited from that perspective. If it was attempting to do anything with Taiwan. Taiwan is far more secure. Now, with Taiwan did offer, okay, Hong Kong to say, look, if you don't want to be part of the communist Chinese, be part of the real China, okay, which they still claim to represent they represent to be the true government of China. Now, that's all well and good that Taiwan says that, but Taiwan doesn't have any capability for force projection. They can't defend Hong Kong, okay? And I think the people of Hong Kong kind of know that. I think the people of Hong Kong understand that if they said, okay, yeah, we're going to be under we're Taiwanese now, or we're going to be under the nationalist Chinese government in Taiwan, we're going to recognize that. I can see communist China going, yeah, you're going to cease to exist one way or another. And there's not much that Taiwan could do about it. Could it drag the United States into the war? Yes. Could it drag Japan into the war? Yes. Is it possible that Russia joins us, all right, to fight the Chinese? Yeah, we'd have to do a lot of selling. Let's be honest. We'd have to do a lot of tap dancing and singing, all right, to convince them to join us against the Chinese, because let's be frank, we don't have a border with China. Those tens of millions of the Chinese horde aren't going to get on boats and come to the United States, okay? But they can march into Russia.
And they've had their eye on Russian territory for a very long time.
Well, I mean, they're neighbors. They're not bad neighbors. They're not great neighbors, though.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to shake out, but it's
completely.
Well, no, MC, it's rather interesting, though, that this is kind of overshadowing what was the whole Iran issue about 3 weeks ago. That's kind of gone to the back burner, and now China seems to be the flashpoint. It's all in the same area of the world, though. Haven't you noticed?
Well, overseas? I don't think China's even Taiwan is not even close to to the Middle East.
No, actually, if you look at Iran on a map, them in the distance to China isn't that great.
Okay, Iran is closer to China than China is to the United States. I will agree with you. And yes, you've got the Silk Road. I understand that. But that Silk Road is a windy path through a lot of mountains. Okay, I don't see an easy.
I didn't say that they had each other over for tea, MC.
Okay, but it's, yeah, you could. They're I don't know about how close they are. They have a mutual enemy, the United States. That's true. And politics does make strange bedfellows. So we'd have to see.
And Memes of Destruction is in the chat. Hey, Memes, I noticed you did upload a couple of those interviews you did. Did you upload all of them yet?
One does not meddle with Mother Russia. Mother Russia meddle with you. Well, you'd have to convince the Russians that they're going to get something good out of it. And I don't think Russia necessarily has any interest in combating in that direction. It would.
Well, can't Russia use follow along here. Russia uses the excuse to go to war. They only take a small amount of territory, but it happens to be a strip headed towards a seaport. Right? Now they have a port, another deep water port.
Okay, but full of Chinese citizens, right? I mean, you got to remember, China has a lot of citizens. I mean, if push came to shove, you would hope to be able to deal with China through a broad-based coalition, and that would include Russia. And it also, if you could really swing it, you could also try to include India. Now, what will that cause? Well, that could cause, if India gets involved, Pakistan could get involved. I mean, the whole world, we could have a World War III just begin because of this, theoretically. Do I expect that to happen? No, but...
Well, the British have a lot to deal with right now. They really do, but Hong Kong was a British territory. Why are the British just staying silent on this issue?
What can they do?
They have force projection. They are not a third world country. MC.
What? They have limited force projection. Yes. In the Atlantic, they have force projection capability all the way over to the Pacific and any kind of large extent. No. They just don't have the manufacturing. They don't have the facilities to do it. The only thing that you deal with is do we win World War III? If a world war is fought with nuclear weapons, nobody wins. But that's really the main joker in this entire scenario. If we really do come to blows in a large scale conflict, eventually the loser will use nuclear weapons, I think.
Well, no, and I think the big dichotomy is the people of Hong Kong are standing up for the limited freedoms they have, while the contrast is Portland, where you have a group of people, Antifa, fighting for restrictions upon freedom of speech. And that dichotomy really is quite pathetic, to be honest.
I would agree with you. I would definitely agree with you. Unfortunately, it's getting late. I'm going to have to drop out here, so I'll see you later.
Yeah, MC, are you going to be doing a morning show tomorrow? We're going to wrap up here soon anyway. I'll let Doku have a few minutes, but you want to go, so I'll let you talk first.
Yeah, I am going to do a morning stream. Tomorrow will be an hour early, though. It'll be 5 a.m. So,
all right.
Much appreciated. I'll talk to you all later.
Yep, take it easy, MC. Doku, when are you and Exiled Opinions going live again? And any last thoughts on really the sad state of affairs?
Oh, well, honestly, Exiled Opinions should have been live last night. I dropped the ball on that one. And Shandor, if you're listening to this, my apologies. I started feeling rather ill, so I passed out on my couch, and I didn't wake up until roughly 7 this morning. So that's purely on me. So if you guys were looking forward to the drinking game, you can blame me. That was my fuck up. I don't know. As far as this whole situation with it, I just find it mind-boggling that you have people in Hong Kong waving the American flag, singing the national anthem, and then you have people in Portland, Oregon, or any other area that is pro Antifa or thinks for whatever reason that the stars and stripes represent fascism and burn the flag. What the hell is going on, man? What kind of backwards ass bizarro world is this? It, freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, right to assembly, unreasonable search. This is all apparently Nazi stuff, but you're supporting anarcho-communism. What the hell is wrong with you? Like, look in the fucking mirror, dude. Like, please, do you have any kind of self-awareness? Do you understand the kind of bullshit you're advocating for? You're advocating for, oh, well, hate speech. Somebody says something that I don't like, censor them. Well, now there's a group of LGBT YouTube content creators that are suing YouTube because YouTube did the same thing you're advocating for. And I will, Trump, looking at you, I'm pissed on this one. Red flag laws. You think that's not going to get abused the same way that the fucking YouTube DMCA strike policies are abused? No, don't do that. You shall not be infringed. You're telling me that we have people in another country who care more about the ideas of rights, liberties, and freedoms than people in a country that guarantees them those rights, liberties, and freedoms? What the hell kind of bizarro clown world is this shit? Mad Dodge, help me out here, man. What the fuck is going on?
You stepped into the Twilight Zone. But no, guys, thank you everybody for coming out. It has been great. Hey, we are going to start the new Vampire the Masquerade series here in the next week or so, probably. We're gonna pre-record it from Discord and then do some editing and upload it. If you would like to join in, let one of us know and we will get you a Discord link. We have been almost playing the game every day in Discord. So do jump in while you still have a chance. If not, then hopefully you'll watch it when it comes out. We might be back tomorrow, not quite sure yet. I do know Saturday is my son's birthday. I will be gone hanging out with him. It is what it is. Take it easy, everybody. Good night, good luck. And hey, Candid, I hope you're enjoying France still. We're out of here.